I have a panel that has joined me and will be helping us dissect what it has been a year on, what it means for Kenya, what hopes there are, if any, indeed, from this particular handshake. And just before we get into the conversation, let's sample some views from around the country that we got a little earlier. President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga may have buried the hatchet and called a truce in March last year, but has that been of any benefit to you? We sampled the views of Kenyans from various counties.
Saturday, 9th March 2019 marks 1 year since the March celebrated handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. We have been speaking to Kenyans to know whether the handshake has significantly impacted them on their everyday life. These are your thoughts.
I don't think the handshake has helped us because we do not have the full details of what the handshake entails.
Sijaona manufaa yote kwa hii handshake. Kama sisi vijana tunaendelea tu kutamak, bado tunatafuta. Tulikuwa tuna expect creation of jobs kwa vijana.
Imetuumiza sana. Of course baada ya kusaidia wakulima, naona wakulima wanahangaika mbaya zaidi. Sasa ni kama pesa yote ya wakulima imeenda kwa handshake.
It was a very positive thing for all of us because there was a lot of high temperature all over. Everybody was scared, like what tribe is next to me and what's going to happen next.
Tourism has been boosted due to the political instability in the country.
Sijaona matunda ya handshake hata kidogo. Sababu mimi tangu handshake ifanyike, mimi naona vita ndio tena imerudi Kenya ya corruption wakipigana na Ruto sasa. Sasa tujui hii handshake ilikuwa ya kwenda kungoa Ruto pale ama ilikuwa ya kusaidia Kenya wote.
Mimi naona ni kitu nzuri sana kwa sababu saizi kuna venye unaweza Kenya mahali popote na ufanye kazi na amani.
Mashida tuko nazo ni zile tulikuwa nazo before. Sasa hizi ni impact yote iko nayo.
Imeleta stability in the economy na hiyo ina manufaa mengi kwa Kenya wote.
And now we can get into the conversation, and to be honest, my panel is a bit not happy that we were not able to listen into those opinions from around the country. But I will give you an opinion of a gentleman who was meant to have joined us here at the Parliament buildings for this conversation, and that is the leader of Senate Majority and the Elgeyo Marakwet Senator, that is Murkomen. And he said, and I quote here from his tweet earlier, "The handshake is the worst political fraud ever witnessed in this country. It's being used as a scheme to fight one individual together with a charade that is called Fight Against Corruption. It's a shame." Kamodo Eganjo, you can respond now.
I think that's an unfortunate overstatement. I think, of course, you know, there are challenges with the handshake, and part of what Murkomen mentions, there are issues there. But I think on the whole, nobody can doubt that between March, what's the date? What was the date? Actually, March 8th and March 10th, this country was different. And I think we must recognize that. And that's a reality. Now, as to whether then the consequences of that handshake is what we expected, their president has delivered, there are things it hasn't delivered. But it made a difference to the political climate of this country in a way that very few other things would have been able to do. Yeah. So I think to say that it's just a hoax, I think it's an unfortunate overstatement.
All right.
Yeah.
Otiende Amolo?
Well, I think it is a very unfortunate statement, especially coming from a person who's the leader of majority in the Senate. When you're the leader of the majority in the Senate, although the government is not in parliament,
just hold up your mic.
Although the government is not in parliament, it is assumed that where the executive is supporting, where the president is supporting an initiative, one would imagine that a person of that nature would be supporting that kind of initiative. Because the handshake and the BBI is about the future of this country. Anybody who attacks it is a person who does not want a good future for this country.
All right. Cherargei, he seems to echo some concerns, especially when it comes to targeting some individuals. And corruption is one of the main points of focus for this task force. Do you echo the same?
I agree with Senator Murkomen,
Hold it up a bit.
the leader of majority. because from the word go, cosmetically is what many people believe that the handshake and BBI is the future of the country. But the underlying factors of the handshake is what is more lethal and ruthless. And therefore I agree with him that it's a fraud, it's a hoax. For some of us who doubted this handshake from the word go, has become a poison chalice, and now the true colors of what handshake is all about. And therefore as a country, if you talk about, for example, the future of the country, we already have the constitution, we have so many things that we can look up to, but after that handshake, I hear people talking about development, hear people talking about peace. We don't have peace in this country, we have calm. When you talk about development, the big four agenda has never taken off.
We don't have peace, we have calm.
Yes, it's just calm.
So this is just a temporary state that you don't
It's just false, what we call false security of what is happening.
All right. Daisy, I'll give you a chance to respond to what Murkomen said and also what Cherargei said.
Well, I think that what I would like to say, I don't want to respond to what Murkomen has said. I just want to say that I think our politicians need to be very careful about the things that they say, because sometimes the political statements that are made have a way of raising unnecessary tensions and not resolving issues. What is true about the handshake, and I want to concur with what Kamodo is saying, is that it changed the climate of Kenya. The political climate, giving us an opportunity to be able to hash out whatever challenges we face as a country. I do agree with the Senator when he says that what we have is calm and not peace. But this is a calm that we should use to actually ensure that we foster peace. And when our politicians make sweeping statements without really backing them up, I think then we are moving into dangerous territory. And this is a well-beaten, it's a well-worn path, because it's almost like we actually want to revisit the things that we've done before. We know where this kind of politically charged statements lead in Kenya. And so I think that coming on the anniversary, it's such a statement coming on the anniversary of the handshake is not measured. And I think that we need to be calm. Our politicians need to also start calming down and finding alternative ways of voicing their disaffection where they have.
Professor, as the vice chairperson of the Building Bridges Initiative, you're collecting views from around the country. And what you've heard here is also a view that represents many. How do you receive such, candid views on this particular handshake that bore the task force?
Leaders are there to lead. And if you look at handshakes all over the world, not everybody has always agreed with that handshake. If you look at the handshake of Mandela and de Klerk, the radical wing of ANC did not embrace it. If you look at the handshake of Rabin and Yasser Arafat, quite a number of Palestinians didn't agree with it, and in fact it didn't last. If you look at the handshake of Trump and Kim Jong-un, quite a number of Americans, Democrats, don't agree with it. So realistically, you don't expect everybody to agree with what the two leaders did. And that's normal in a political society. But us as a team, it is our duty to hear everybody, those pro, those against, and then we shall tell Kenyans, this is what Kenyans are saying about the initiative.
And you'll tell us how far you are in that, because I believe your mandate to give us a report will be in the next probably 2-3 months as per the initial announcement, but perhaps there's an extension that has been said would be put out there. And I'll just throw this, and now we can interject it as the conversation continues. These are 9 points that the 14-member task force is focusing on, and the ethnic antagonism, lack of national ethos, inclusivity, devolution, divisive elections, safety and security, corruption, shared prosperity, responsibilities and rights. What screams the need for attention first in this particular 9-point agenda that they have for you?
In my view, I think there is almost no issue there that is not of primary importance to Kenyans. But I think the one about economic empowerment for me is more important than all the others, because what Kenyans are struggling with is not really about sharing political power. I think that's an issue that excites the elite. But if you ask the majority, 99% of Kenyans, they want that unity so that they can be empowered. And I think one of my challenges with the BBI is that one of my challenges with the handshake is that while it promised a lot, there's a point at which it looks like it's an end in itself. You know, while what it was intended to do was give us an opportunity from day one to resolve our issues, it has tended to drag the issues. And one of the ways that it would have made that easier is from the beginning, isolate the issues. You know, this country, it doesn't have 20 problems, it has very few. And actually the BBI should have, you know what COE did? You said, what are the contentious issues? All these issues in the 9 are actually in the Constitution. Inclusion is in the Constitution, devolution is in the Constitution, equality is in the Constitution. The question they should have asked is, what is it that the Constitution has not been able to deliver in these issues, and what are the options? So that Kenyans are then having an informed conversation about very, very specific issues. A conversation nationally about everything on everybody is actually not useful. We don't have that luxury. Right. So I'm just saying, in terms of structure and strategy, I think it's been wrong. But I think it can be rescued, but I think we're doing it the wrong way, because the issues in Kenya are basic. Yes. Give us options. If we're talking about devolution, what is the problem with devolution? Isolate the options. Let us have the conversation about it. Right now, there are 20 options on the table. Who knows what those options are about? Yes. So we also need to recognize that we have resolved a lot of our issues constitutionally. Let's now narrow down to specific solutions.
Again, just to repeat, you can interject as we continue, but to throw it to you, Professor, because this is in response to your task force there, and which has been criticized by many that it was selected without public participation, and perhaps this is use of public resource that we don't really need to be putting to, you know, the expense to the Kenyans again, because we already have these issues articulated by many other commissions.
I think the first thing I should say first is that it's not in my place to comment on whether it had public participation or not, because I think that was something that the appointing authorities should have looked at. We have a very clear mandate that the Gazette notice tells us. This is what you're supposed to do. And while I agree with what Kamotho is saying, we are not really a body the way CKRC or the Committee of Experts was, for example. You'll find that even in our budget line, we don't have anything for civic education, any budget line for ensuring that there's public participation and all that. So if you look at the way we are constituted, then we might not be able to do the very things that other bodies were very able to do. But we are sticking to what the Gazette notice mandated us to do. And when we go to this county basis and when we have our institutional stakeholder meeting, just the other day we had IBC, Ford Kenya, Democratic Party, University Academic Staff Union, and we have had these institutional meetings. And they usually tell us, as Kamotho is saying, what exactly they feel is a problem. I can give you, for example, when people talk to us about corruption, they are very clear that this has got nothing to do with the laws or institutions. They're basically saying that is all there, and they're telling us, hey, if somebody is corrupt, go the China way, hang them.
Right.
If somebody is corrupt and he holds a public office and it has been alleged and a case taken to court, let them step aside, things like that. Then they also tell us things also which will mean that our advice will be that, hey, what Kenyans are saying about devolution, for example, that increase the percentage of funds that is going to the counties, and it ranges from 35 to 50%, we shall say, hey, look here, this is something that you have to go to the Constitution. So we shall distill it.
As much as your mandate is defined, Kamotho brings up something, and I hope I'm not misquoting you, that there probably would be a need to change the approach as we continue further, because it is very limited in the sense we might be repeating ourselves. We've already had these issues discussed, and now we want solutions, not go back to the counties, each county, and collect people's views. Is there room to change your approach?
And again, that would have to go to the way what the Gazette notice mandated us to do. If you want to change that, then you'd have to change what we were mandated to do. But let me just say this. If, for example, I pick one of the issues that is in the 9-point agenda of the 2 principles of inclusivity, initially we had thought, for example, that we would just sample what were initially the 10 regions, 8 provinces plus the ones which are usually divided into 2, which is basically Eastern and the Rift Valley. But we later realized that immediately we started going to parts of Upper Eastern. Each county was saying, hey, you must come to us because that is the unit that is recognized by the Constitution as a county government. And therefore we changed and said, okay, for Kenyans to feel that they are part of this process, we will go to all the 47 counties.
When you hear about the mandate, Daisy, and being someone who's all about the community advocacy and awareness, their approach and what they're saying is their mandate, is it really going to change things, or should we just go back to what has been done before?
You know, while I appreciate that the handshake was able to bring the calm, I actually think that the whole BBI is a way of the leadership running away from their responsibility. Because the issues that are raised, those 9-point agenda, as Kamodo has rightly said, are well articulated in the Constitution. But what we have is actually a failure of leadership. We have leaders who have failed to do what needs to be done, and so now we're calling the people to ask them again, what do you think the problem is? We actually know what the problem is. The other thing is, while we focus so heavily on building bridges and we focus so heavily on the handshake, nobody is talking about the plight of the ordinary citizen. Yes. We have a serious economic downturn. We have high household pressures, high dependency ratio, high unemployment. None of these things are being addressed. We've got these broad sweeping statements where people are talking about shared prosperity, whatever that means, you know, or, you know, talking about, I do agree that we need to deal decisively with corruption because it is a cancer that is eating away at this nation. But we do have institutions that are mandated to do that. And so what we're essentially doing as a country is allowing our leaders to run away from responsibility and skirt around issues, almost like we're winding down a clock to an opportune time when whatever it is that they have decided they're going to do, they will do. So I think it behoves us as citizens, and everybody needs to get involved. Yes. That we actually need to start demanding more of our leaders. We need to start demanding accountability from our leaders. We need the plight of the ordinary citizen addressed. We've got serious issues that need to be dealt with in this country that are not being dealt with. Yes. We're not talking about the debt issue, okay? We're not talking about unemployment. We're not talking about extrajudicial killings. There's so many real issues that are affecting people day to day. Yes. And you don't need to change the law. We don't need to change the constitution. You see, that's the other problem. In Kenya, when our leaders don't want to do what they are required to do, they tell us that the law is the problem. Because remember in 2007, 2008, we said that the reason why we had this whole blow up is because our constitution was, it was exclusive. And so we got a new constitution. Today we're being told again that our constitution is problematic. Right. So I think that we need to have more honest conversations. And I'm hoping that through this building bridges, that we will build a bridge to honesty as a nation, whereby we actually nail what our problem is as a country.
Bwana Otiende Amolo, you as a former ombudsman, you were collecting views, and you were actually standing for the public, especially in terms of their rights in your office. And you still do represent many as a Rarieda Member of Parliament. What should be the priority for you moving forward with this Building Bridges initiative and this whole conversation of the handshake?
Thank you, Mark. Let me go back a little to your original question. In terms of the 9 points, what would be the priority areas? In my view, there are 2 key priority areas. And one is the question of corruption.
Yes.
And the second one is the whole issue of what has been called electoral justice. I think that even without the BBI team completing its work,
yes,
the fact of the handshake has caused us to start working on the issue of corruption. Corruption is the form of impunity. And impunity always has 4 stages. There's a question of disclosure, investigation, prosecution, and sentencing.
Yes.
At least now we are seeing instances where there's disclosure. The corruptions that we are seeing now, these are not new things. These are things that happened 4, 5 years ago. But this atmosphere has enabled the disclosure. Secondly, it has enabled investigation. And so when people like Senator Murkomen now mistake bring the question of the fight on corruption on BBI,
targeting.
It is because there are now concerted efforts to start investigating corruption. So to me, that is already a very good thing. We now need to go to the stage of serious prosecution, because some of the prosecutions may not have been, quite serious, but serious prosecution and then sentencing. So that is a good thing. And that is not something that would require changing the constitution or changing anything. It's just something of creating the right environment. The second one is the whole issue of elections. I was part of the team that wrote the constitution, and one of the things we believed then, that if you decongest power from the presidency and distribute it all over as we did, through devolution to parliament and elsewhere, even the interest in the presidency will reduce. And once the interest in the president reduces, the tensions that come with elections will reduce. We were wrong. Because the interest in the presidency and all the other elections is as high as it ever was.
Right.
And so the question that the BBI team will be answering on that issue will include then what do we do around elections to get our elections right. And that question will have to involve revisiting the basic question of, is our system of government the right one? Having adopted the presidential system. And when we were writing the constitution, this country was almost divided 51% was in favor of a parliamentary system and 49% in favor of a presidential system. And so we recommended a parliamentary system. But when the politicians then went to Naivasha, they changed it to a presidential system. I think it is time to revisit 10 years down the line. Do we retain the presidential system or do we consider a parliamentary system? Now, in terms of how this moves forward, naturally, if there are things, and in my view, there are very many fundamental things which if the BBI team deals with, will have to come to parliament. Some of them will have to come to the people by way of a referendum. My worry is in terms of the time that we have. And I think that the team may delay in starting its work because of funding and other challenges. As I understand, they've covered about 21 or 22 counties. Now, if we go on at that pace, by the time they are done, we might not have time to actually resolve even the good things that come from that process.
Right.
And I suspect, therefore, that the team may have to revisit its workings in terms of the schedule, because the fundamental conversations in this country, if you are to have them to get to the point of having any conversation on the constitution, you need at least 1 to 1.5 years. Now, we don't want to have those conversations dangerously close to the next election. So that is the only thing that I think that the team will have to...
All right, Cherargei, I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things that have been brought up, but also say what you think is the most urgent in your view.
I agree with Waiganja, and I think it is the opinion of most of the panelists that that the PPI and some of the issues, the 9-pointer that has been raised, is not as important as what is affecting Kenyans. And I want to thank my friend Otiende that is now letting out the cat out of the bag, that the intention of ODM or the intention of the promoters of a handshake was to have a referendum to ensure they expand the executive at the expense of the unemployment rates in this country, poverty levels, and the development issues that are of great importance. And therefore, I've always known that BBI is just a vehicle of being used as a succession politics for 2022. And I'm meant to understand that in 12 or is 11 of April, they will be visiting my county, Nandi. And since all of us have agreed, all those issues are captured in the Constitution. Right. I don't see why Kenya should waste time. And secondly...
Are you saying they're not welcome?
Yeah, of course, they are not welcome. I'll not appear before them. Secondly, what I want to... It is shocking, after visiting Eastern, I was shocked that the BPI was saying The country is now ripe. Everybody wants a referendum. Then we ask them, what is this a referendum about? They say, we should take care of perennial losers. We should look at the power is concentrated too much. We should at least share so that we have presidential parliamentary system where we have the executive prime minister, we have ceremonial presidents. We should shift from presidential system to parliamentary system. What I would have expected as a young person, as an elected leader, is to tell us what are we doing about the economy that is not doing so good. To tell us what are we going to do with young people that are facing challenges. To tell us what are we going to do with gender parity in terms of
For you, it's
leadership.
not system of governance.
That is what we should be looking at.
Real quick, and then I take a break.
No. I want to say something because Otiende has raised the issue about electoral justice. And I want to talk about the management of our political parties, because that's really where the problem is. Yeah. It's not even about our system, okay? Because while I do agree that ideally we should have considered proportional representation. Even from the time of Bomas, there was a strong push. Even when the committee of experts were sitting, there was a strong push for proportional representation, which would have been ideal, especially for a very, divided tribally divided nation such as ours, and also to foster inclusivity. But we have a real problem in the way our political parties are managed. When you talk about inclusivity, the Constitution is very clear. It actually provides inclusion of women, youth, persons with disability, marginalized groups, and the Political Parties Act, the Elections Act, all capture this. But our political parties remain to be one-man shows. The oversight institutions, the ORPP, from the time that office was set up, it has been hampered. It has been under-resourced. Remember that the former registrar of political parties was in an acting capacity for her entire tenure. Right now we have one also in an acting capacity. IEBC is persistently interfered with, and right now the politicians are busy actually drafting a law that will guarantee that the political parties have a stronghold in the management of the electoral process, which, by the way, even falls foul of the Constitution, which says that all independent commissions should be devoid of any political influence. So you see, our politicians are our leaders are running away from the fact that the biggest problem that we have, which starts from the management of the political parties, is that we have a political leadership that does not want to be fettered within the confines of the law. And so every time they meet with the law, they consider it a barrier, so they look at ways of changing it to favor themselves so that they have a freer hand in doing things. Issues like the 2/3 gender rule could easily be met if the political parties simply abided by the rules, Article 81B of the Constitution. But they will not. Okay. They come up with all manner of things. Same thing with youth, same thing with persons with disability. So already within political parties, with the current political class we have, we do not have electoral justice. And so the same is translated in the way then the electoral process pans out. So I think we need to look at those are the issues that we need to be looking at. The underlying issues that
get us to where we are. I'll take a quick break here just to get back to, we'll have that conversation actually about the IEBC and the new push that is currently ongoing in Parliament. But also we'll have the issues of whether this current push against or fight against corruption is targeting an individual. And Bwana Otiende Amolo, you have something to answer, whether this is actually admitting that referendum is a point here. He's brought it up. We'll be back shortly.